So when we talk about, if you have a finished horse and you're just wanting to keep him in shape, that's super important. And a lot of people that I help, if their horse, I'm helping someone if they're having some issues. So when you're not doing it right, generally what happens is your horse is starting to get sore, and he's suffering from maybe lack of conditioning. And where that plays in is he's going to start having sports injuries or not be able to do his job right and not win. Around our place, we're not rodeoing as hard anymore, and our horses have a tendency to get a little too fat. When your horse is a little too fat and not rode enough, what you're going to see is that it's going to be a little bit more strain on him because it's just harder work. And so I found that it takes quite a bit of work for me to ride him into shape. I have to focus on it. So 2 or 3 days a week isn't enough when you're trying to get a horse into competition condition. And so if that's a problem for you, if you're super busy, a lot of people, well, just like me, they have, either kids or jobs and stuff that's keeping them from riding, and there's not enough time. It's hard, but in some way they have to have consistent exercise. And consistent exercise to me is not where you ride them for 2 hours every single day, but it's a controlled and planned routine. And so my mom, I refer back to her all the time, but I guess she's the one who studied it, and I just kind of listened and got the benefits of it, whatever she says, But when she studied it, she trained racehorses, and she would have calendars and diaries and keep track. And I think that's really good for people who are really busy and have a lot of things going. So if you get a calendar and you write it down, or even make a schedule on your phone, it's that their horse is getting cared for each day. Getting on their back as often as you can really is good. Now the miles and the length of time you ride them and the strain you put on their legs and their body, that takes a little bit of planning and a little bit of education. So when I say that, if you ride a horse too hard, you're going to start getting fatigue injuries. And I did that when I was young. I was pretty excited. I got introduced into the world of dressage. Some friends were doing dressage, and I wanted to really work with my horse and really get her tuned up so I could brag about her to my friends, and I overrode her, just riding her 45 minutes to an hour each night and really working with the extension and the dressage moves. And sure enough, she popped some wind puffs, and it stayed with her for the rest of her life. It was my good barrel horse, but I learned, and so just one way or the other, you can ride them not enough and get the injuries, or too much. And I think there's both ends of the spectrum. I see that's the problem. So generally, my mom used to gallop racehorses, and she would always tell me a 5-minute mile is a pretty good way to judge it. So when she would gallop a racehorse, she'd about gallop a mile in 5 minutes approximately, and that's a gallop. That's not a slow lope. So that's making a horse move out and covering a little bit of ground. So we always talked about 10 minutes would be 2 miles. Now that's not just slow walking or slow trotting, or that's putting some energy into it. So when we trot, we do an extended trot. When we lope, we do I guess I call it, my new word is impulsion, a collected lope where we're driving and working a little bit. And that's when you're getting them in shape. 10 minutes of driving, of strenuous exercise. And we're talking about conditioning their body. A horse that's nervous and you need to walk them, well, we could add a walking on top of that or whatever to spend a little more time with their mind and letting them relax. But when we're talking about conditioning them, so 45 minutes of heavy conditioning is quite a lot. And I don't go that far. When I condition a horse, I always tell people, I don't spend much time on their back walking them around slow. So I want a horse to move out with a little bit of energy, and that's why I use an over and under whip, or whip, I say over and under rope. It's not really to whip them so much, but it's as to kind of like make sure they got some energy in their step, and just to let them know that we're not out here riding just to ride all day. We're trying to get something done, and we're, I guess, controlled exercise or guided exercise, right? Instructed exercise. And so when we do circles, it's really important to frame them up and make a horse use his propulsion and muscles. When I say propulsion muscles, I want them to get their hind end up underneath them. And one way you can kind of make that happen is use your bit. I like to use a bit with a little, some shank on it, a little bit longer shank. And the reason I like that is it makes it easier for me to get their nose perpendicular to the ground. So this horse wants to overtuck, kind of hide her face a little bit and bring her nose past perpendicular. I want a horse's nose perpendicular to the ground. just pointing at the ground. So sometimes they'll get their nose stuck out in front of them, and that'll be not very conducive to a horse working right. And those are the ones that generally are already sore, or they'll get sore if you work them much like this. But you know, just a nice 40 or 50 foot circle with their nose pointing towards the ground. And then in order to keep them going forward, a lot of people will put their hands up to make them go. And they forget that that doesn't make a horse go faster. You drive them with your feet, you know, or sometimes over and under rope. But so putting a little bit of energy in their step or pushing their hind end up underneath them with your, you know, feet or your gas pedals is what's really important in helping that horse build those propulsion muscles. And I call this working with impulsion. Okay, it's collected, he's collected, but driving up underneath himself. That's what we want. And so just to lope those circles like that really helps a horse to get the body shape and condition that I'm looking for. And so I don't do a lot of hard stops on a horse. It's for the muscular workout and some aerobic workout. That's what I'm conditioning a finished horse for. So probably, you know, the 2 miles working like that, equally each direction, circles each direction. Once in a while, a small circle or two. That's about what I do with a finished horse as far as their exercise. I'll add pattern practice on that as needed. On a true open horse, generally we're not needing too much pattern practice, but 10 minutes of warm-up exercise, aerobic and muscular workout, and then 10 minutes of pattern exercise would be pretty normal day. Usually, I'll do it about 4 days a week and plan on making some runs on the weekend or those other days. I've always believed it's just been our program. Generally, our horses get a day or two off a week. If I'm competing real heavily on them, I'll sometimes get on their back some of those days, but I'm not riding them too hard, but I'm seeing if they're okay. And sometimes I can't tell how they're doing unless I'm on their back. So part of that exercise is just kind of as needed. It might be just a light exercise, or if they're feeling real good, I'll give them, you know, some exercise and warm their muscles up and work them a little bit. So that's about what I do with an open horse.